My mom demanded I give my newly bought apartment to my pregnant sister. When I said no, she threw a cake at me. So I hired a lawyer, forced the sale on the house. We co-owned and made them move out. This whole mess really kicked off recently, but the backstory starts about 7 years ago. That's when my grandmother passed away. She was a good woman, and I miss her. In her will, she left her house to both me and my younger sister, Addison. Addison is 25 now. The will was very clear. We both own the house 50-50. No complicated stuff. When Grandma died, I was 21 and still in university trying to get my degree. Addison was 18, just finishing up high school. Our mother, Erica, had been living with Grandma, taking care of her in her last few years. So after Grandma passed, Mom just stayed in the house. Addison lived there too. Of course, it made sense at the time. I was living in student dorms then, in a series of pretty basic rental places after I graduated and started working. I didn't need the space at Grandma's house. The setup was straightforward. Mom and Addison would live in the house, and they wouldn't pay me any rent. In return, they were supposed to cover all the bills like property taxes, electricity, water, and general upkeep of the place. I was okay with that. It felt like a practical solution, and I thought it was helping them out. My dad was never really around. He left when I was a kid, so Mom raised me and Addison on her own. I always thought our relationship was pretty normal. Maybe not super close all the time, but decent enough. I certainly never expected anything like what happened recently. Once I graduated at 22, I got a job and set a big goal for myself: buy my own place. That became my main focus. For 6 solid years, I worked hard. I took almost every overtime shift I could get. I didn't go on big vacations or buy expensive gadgets or new cars. My car is old, but it runs. My clothes are fine, but not fancy. I packed my own lunch for work. Every spare bit of money went into a savings account. It was slow going, but I was determined. Friends would go out or plan trips, and most of the time I had to say no. It wasn't always easy, but I kept picturing having my own keys to my own door. Earlier this year, I finally did it. I had saved up enough for a good down payment on a 2-bedroom apartment. It cost $200,000. It's in a decent part of the city, not too flashy, but safe and clean, and it cuts my commute to work down by a lot. Signing the papers for that apartment was one of the best days of my life. I spent the first month after getting the keys painting the walls myself. I bought some basic furniture, a bed, a sofa, a small table, and chairs. It took a while to get it all set up. I officially moved all my stuff in about 8 weeks ago. For the first time, I had a place that was truly mine, that I had earned. The demand for my apartment felt like it came from nowhere, but my mother and sister always had a bit of a strange attitude about my money. It was like they thought because I was working and single, whatever I earned was partly theirs, or at least they should have a say in how I spent it or get a piece of it. For example, if I mentioned getting a work bonus, my mother would almost immediately suggest something I could buy for the house, meaning Grandma's house where they lived. One time, it was a new washing machine they needed. I pointed out that they lived there and upkeep was their responsibility, but she made me feel guilty, saying the old one was a real hassle. I think I ended up giving her half the money for it. Addison was similar. Even after she started working a part-time job at a local store, she'd often ask me for money. Can you lend me $50? My paycheck is late or my phone bill is higher than I thought. Can you help? It wasn't huge amounts usually, but it was frequent. Her reasoning was always that I earned more than her and didn't have kids or a partner to support. I often gave in just to keep the peace, but it did start to bother me. Then about 2 years ago, Addison started dating Walt. He's 26. About a year into their relationship, he moved into Grandma's house with Mom and Addison. I wasn't happy about that at all. I'd met Walt a few times. He seemed okay, but he never seemed to have a steady job. He'd talk about looking for the right opportunity or gig work, but mostly he just seemed to be around the house. Once he moved in, it felt like the requests for money, or for me to chip in for house repairs, got more frequent. My mother would call saying the electricity bill was huge, or a pipe had burst. I started pushing back more firmly, saying there were 3 adults living there now, and they needed to manage their own household budget. It usually led to her sounding disappointed in me or saying I didn't understand how hard things were for them. A few months ago, right around the time I was in the middle of buying my apartment, Addison told us she was pregnant. My mother was over the moon about becoming a grandmother. I congratulated Addison. Of course, it was big news. We didn't talk about her living situation changing. I just assumed she and Walt would either stay at Grandma's house. It's a 3-bedroom place, so there's enough room where they'd eventually get their own place like most couples do when they start a family. No one said anything to me to suggest otherwise. It was about a month after I'd finally moved all my boxes into my new apartment and was starting to feel settled. My mother called me earlier in the week. She said we needed to have a family meeting and that it was very important. She asked me to come over to Grandma's house. I figured it was something about the baby, maybe planning a baby shower or talking about names. I didn't suspect anything major. I drove over that afternoon. When I walked into the living room, my mother, Addison, and Walt were all sitting there looking very serious. There was a chocolate cake sitting on the coffee table. I remember thinking that was a bit strange for an important meeting. Why the cake? My mother started talking. She began with a long speech about how families are supposed to support each other, how everyone has to make sacrifices for the good of the family. Then she started talking about Addison and the baby, how Addison was pregnant and it was a vulnerable time for her, how Walt was really trying hard to find a good stable job, but the economy was tough. Addison sat there looking down at her lap mostly. She looked really uncomfortable. Walt was just staring at his shoes, not saying a word. And then my mother just came out with it. She said that since I was single and I had this new 2-bedroom apartment all to myself, and Addison and Walt were about to start their family and desperately needed a stable, nice place for the baby, the obvious and fair solution was for me to give my apartment to Addison and Walt. She didn't ask. She stated it like it was the only logical thing to do. She said I could move into the spare bedroom at Grandma's house. She even smiled as if she'd solved a big problem that I hadn't even known existed. She said it was my family duty and the Christian thing to do, even though we weren't a particularly religious family. I was completely floored. I think my jaw literally dropped. I just stared at her for a few seconds, trying to process what she just said. Give them my apartment, the one I just bought, the one I'd worked 6 years for. She went on saying that I didn't really need all that space just for one person. She said Addison deserved a fresh start in a new clean place for her first baby. She emphasized how perfect my apartment would be for them. New appliances freshly painted. She even added that it would be so much easier for her to help Addison with the baby if Addison was living in my apartment because it was nicer than Grandma's old house. When I finally found my voice, I told her very clearly and very calmly, no, I said that is absolutely not going to happen. I explained I worked for 6 years to save up for that apartment. It's mine. I bought it with my money. I am not giving it to anyone. I told them Addison and Walt could continue living in Grandma's house, which is perfectly fine and has plenty of room, or they could look for their own apartment like every other young couple starting a family does. The change in my mother was instant. It was like a switch flipped. Her face got tight and red. Her voice went from sweet and reasonable to loud and angry. She started yelling that I was being incredibly selfish. She said I was ungrateful. She claimed they had allowed me to benefit from Grandma's house all these years by not making me pay for its upkeep or demanding I sell my share earlier, which was a total twist of reality since I co-owned it, and they were living there completely rent-free. Addison immediately started to cry, big heaving sobs, saying, I can't believe you don't care about me or my baby. How can you be so cruel? Walt finally looked up and mumbled something like, yeah, man, I thought you were a better person than this. This is low. The argument got louder and uglier. I kept my voice even, but I was firm. I repeated, my apartment is not an option. It's not up for discussion. My mother got more and more agitated. She was pacing back and forth a bit. Then she walked over to the coffee table, picked up a big slice of that chocolate cake with her bare hand, and she threw it right at me. It hit me square in the chest and splattered up onto my face and into my hair. She was screaming by this point, proper screaming that I was a disgrace, a terrible son. And how could I put my own selfish desires above the needs of my pregnant sister and her unborn child? Addison was wailing. Walt was just standing there looking shocked, but also sort of nodding along with my mother. I didn't shout back. I just took a napkin from the table and slowly wiped the cake off my face and shirt as best I could. I told them, this conversation is finished. I said I was leaving. As I walked to the front door, all 3 of them were yelling at me. My mother was shouting that I would regret this for the rest of my life, that if I walked out that door without agreeing, I wasn't her son anymore. Addison was crying that I was going to cause her to have a miscarriage because of all the stress I was putting her under. It was a chorus of insults. I just walked out and closed the door behind me. I drove back to my apartment, the smell of chocolate cake still on me. I felt numb at first, then really angry. I didn't answer my phone when it started ringing almost immediately. My mother, then Addison, I let it go to voicemail. The messages they left were more of the same. The next week was a nightmare. My phone was blowing up constantly. My mother sent these incredibly long, rambling text messages, pages and pages of them, about how I was tearing the family apart, how I was selfish, how I owed it to Addison. She wrote about all the sacrifices she'd made for us as kids. Addison sent shorter texts, but they were more emotional. Things like, "You're going to make me lose this baby. I hope you're happy, and my baby deserves a good home, and you're denying it that." She even sent me a picture of an ultrasound with a message saying, "This is who you're hurting." Then the extended family started. My mother must have called everyone she knew. My aunts, my mother's sisters, started calling me. A few cousins I hadn't spoken to in ages sent me messages on social media. They all had the same story clearly fed to them by my mother. I was being horribly selfish and unreasonable. I was rich because I owned an apartment, apparently, and was refusing to help my poor pregnant sister. One aunt told me I needed to do the right thing and honor my mother. Another accused me of abandoning my family responsibilities. None of them seemed to have been told that Addison was already living rent-free in a house I co-owned, or that the demand was for me to give up my own newly purchased home. I tried to explain the situation to the first aunt who called, but she just talked over me saying, "Family comes first." After that, I didn't bother engaging much. I sent one group text message to my mother and sister. I wrote, "My decision about my apartment is final. It is not yours, and I will not be giving it to you. Your behavior at the meeting, especially mom throwing cake at me and this constant harassment since, is completely unacceptable. Do not contact me about the apartment again." That didn't stop them. If anything, it made them angrier. The messages kept coming. I started blocking numbers. First my mother, then Addison, then the aunts. It was stressful. I wasn't sleeping well. It became crystal clear that they genuinely truly believed they were entitled to my apartment, and I was the bad guy for saying no. There was zero understanding of my side, my work, my rights. The fact that they had a perfectly good free place to live in a house I partly owned just didn't even register with them as a factor. The family meeting with the cake throwing happened about 4 weeks ago now. The harassment, the calls, the texts, the guilt trips, that's been pretty much nonstop until I started blocking people. There's been no resolution, no apology, nothing like that. Things haven't calmed down. Their belief that I've wronged them seems to have become even stronger. I haven't spoken a word directly to my mother or sister since I walked out of that house. Apart from that one text message I sent them, all their attempts to communicate have been one way. Abusive messages, demands, or trying to get other relatives to pressure me. It took a few weeks of this constant stress for me to really think clearly. I realized that this wasn't just a one-off crazy demand. This was how they saw me, as a resource, not as a person with his own life and his own property. Their sense of entitlement was so huge, they couldn't see how messed up their request was. The fact that they were living rent-free in my grandmother's house, a house I co-owned and paid my share of taxes on indirectly through giving for things here and there while demanding my personal apartment. That was the point where something snapped in me. So after all this, after realizing that they will likely never respect me, my boundaries, or my property, I've made a big decision. Their actions have forced my hand. I went to see a lawyer last week. I found one who specializes in property disputes. I laid out the whole story for him, showed him a copy of my grandmother's will and the deed for her house. He confirmed everything. Addison and I own it 50-50. There are no special conditions in the will that say she or my mother has a lifetime right to live there or anything like that. The lawyer explained something called a partition sale. He said that if co-owners of a property can't agree on what to do with it, one co-owner can go to court and ask a judge to order the property to be sold. Then the money from the sale is split between the owners. He said it's a common legal solution for situations like this. So that's what I'm planning to do. I've instructed my lawyer to start the process to force the sale of my grandmother's house. If Addison, my mother, and Walt want to keep living there, Addison will have to buy out my 50% share at its current fair market value. My lawyer and I looked at similar houses in that area, and it's probably worth around $350,000 to $400,000. So my share would be $175,000 to $200,000. Knowing their financial situation, especially with Walt not working steadily, I seriously doubt Addison can come up with that kind of money. So the most likely thing is that the house will be sold to a third party, and Addison and I will each get our share of the cash. This means, of course, that my mother Addison and Walt will have to move out and find somewhere else to live. And it means that any relationship I thought I had with them will be completely over. I'm also planning to make the current no contact permanent with all of them, including any of the extended family who jumped on their bandwagon to harass me. I'm laying all this out here on Reddit because I need to get it off my chest, and I guess I want to know if I'm going too far. So am I wrong for doing this update 1? Hello everyone, it's been 2 months since I wrote my original post. First I want to say thank you. Seriously, I read every single comment and private message. I was expecting a mixed reaction, maybe even some people telling me I was being harsh, but almost everyone was incredibly supportive and shared some really helpful advice. It actually made a big difference to know that I wasn't crazy for thinking their demand was out of line. Just knowing other people saw the situation clearly helped me feel more confident in what I had to do. A lot of you asked similar questions, so I wanted to clear a few things up. Some people asked if there was any fine print in Grandma's will, like a clause giving Mom or Addison lifetime residency. I had my lawyer check this very carefully. The will is simple. The house was left to my grandson, my name, and my granddaughter Addison's name in equal shares as tenants in common. That's it. No mention of anyone having special rights to live there forever. I mentioned this briefly, but to be more specific, my lawyer got a couple of informal estimates from local real estate agents. They think Grandma's house, a 3-bedroom detached place in a decent but not fancy suburb, would likely sell for somewhere between $350,000 and $400,000 in the current market. So my half would be around $175,000 to $200,000 before any selling costs or taxes. A few asked if I'd ever contributed to major repairs or taxes on Grandma's house. Over the 7 years, I probably chipped in a few $1,000s here and there for emergencies. They claimed they couldn't cover like a new water heater one winter and part of a property tax bill when my mom said she was short. I never asked for it back. I co-owned it, so I figured some contribution was fair. Even though they were living there rent-free, but I never paid regular bills or mortgage as there was no mortgage. Addison's boyfriend Walt, still the same situation as far as I know. He's around, but no signs of a steady job. He was definitely part of the family meeting chorus telling me I was selfish. He benefits from the rent-free living too. Any further communication attempts by me, no. After that one text I sent them right after the cake incident, I haven't tried to talk to them. My lawyer told me it was best if all official business about the house went through him. And honestly, after the way they behaved, I didn't want to talk to them anyway. Reading all the comments here and having a couple of months to let the dust settle a bit, even though it was still a sandstorm of family drama, really cemented my decision. The main thing I kept coming back to, and what so many of you pointed out, was the total lack of respect. It wasn't just about them wanting my apartment, it was about how they asked, how they reacted when I said no, and how they genuinely believed they had a right to something I'd worked so hard for. It showed me that they don't see me as an independent person with his own life. They see me as someone who exists to provide for them. The idea of them just carrying on living in Grandma's house rent-free while bad-mouthing me to anyone who would listen and feeling like I was the one who had wronged them, it just became impossible for me to accept. Selling the house wasn't my first choice ever, but I realized it was the only way to make a clean break. It was the only way to stop them from having this financial and emotional hold over me. Any smaller action like just asking for rent? I felt they would fight, ignore, or use it as another way to make my life difficult. This had to be a final cut. So I went ahead with it. Here's what happened with the lawyer in the house. 1. Finding the right lawyer. I spent a bit of time researching lawyers. I didn't want just anyone. I found someone who had a lot of experience with property disputes between family members. Our first meeting was about an hour and a half. I told him the whole story from Grandma's will to the cake. He was very calm and just listened, asked a few questions. He explained the partition sale process very clearly. 2 formal letters sent. The first official step my lawyer took was to draft a very formal letter. It was sent by registered mail to my sister Addison because she's the co-owner. He also sent a copy to my mother just so she was officially informed as a resident. The letter was polite but firm. It stated my intention to sell my 50% share of the property. It included the independent market appraisal range $350,000 to $400,000. It then formally offered Addison the first option to buy my share of the house at fair market value. We gave her 30 days to respond if she was interested in buying me out. 3. The lack of response. We didn't really expect Addison to be able to buy me out, and she didn't. We got no formal reply from Addison or any lawyer on her behalf within that 30-day window. What my lawyer did receive about 2 weeks after our letter was sent was a handwritten letter from my mother. It was not polite. It was several pages long, full of angry accusations. She accused me of being greedy, of trying to make my own sister and her baby homeless, of betraying Grandma's memory. She demanded I stop this legal nonsense immediately. 4. Filing with the court. Once the 30 days were up and Addison hadn't made an offer to buy my share, my lawyer went ahead and filed the partition lawsuit with the local court. This is a formal legal action. It basically asks a judge to order the sale of the house because the co-owners can't agree. Addison was then formally served with the court documents. This means a professional process server hand delivered the legal papers to her at Grandma's house. This whole process, from deciding for sure after my original post to hiring the lawyer, him sending the letter, waiting for a response, and then filing the court papers, took about 6 weeks. It felt like a long 6 weeks. Well, the reaction was pretty much what I expected, only louder. When Addison actually got served with the official court papers for the lawsuit, that's when things really hit the fan. It was real now, not just a letter from a lawyer, but a court case. My mother apparently called my lawyer's office repeatedly. She yelled at his paralegal, demanding to speak to him, accusing him of helping me destroy his family. The paralegal was very professional, apparently, and just told her that her daughter Addison would need to get her own lawyer. Addison did get a lawyer through legal aid. Her lawyer filed a response to my lawsuit. From what my lawyer told me, their first move was to try and delay everything. They also made some arguments about how Addison should be allowed to keep living in the house because she was pregnant and had a low income. They suggested maybe I should be forced to sell my share to her for a very low price, or let her pay me out over many, many years. My lawyer said those arguments were very unlikely to succeed in court. The biggest thing that came out of this immediately is that they finally know I'm not backing down. This isn't a threat. It's happening. The legal wheels are turning. My mother Addison and Walt are apparently extremely stressed. Addison is in her 3rd trimester now, so the timing isn't great for her, but this situation was created by their own demands and actions. For me, even though this is a really unpleasant process, actually taking these steps has lifted a huge weight. It's not just me against their emotional pressure anymore. It's a legal issue being handled by professionals. I've kept my mother and sister blocked on my phone and social media. All necessary communication now goes from my lawyer to Addison's lawyer. It's a weird kind of relief. It's tough, but it's a path to actually getting this resolved once and for all. There's no way I'm stopping this now. Update 2. It's now been 10 months since I wrote that first post asking if I was wrong. It's been about 8 months since my first update when the legal process was just getting started. It feels like a lifetime ago in some ways. The legal stuff with the house sale took a lot longer than I thought it would, but it's finally over. During these past 10 months, life otherwise has just been work. Trying to focus on my job, keeping my head down. I did get a small promotion at work, which was a nice bit of good news in the middle of all this stress. The court did eventually order the partition sale of Grandma's house. It wasn't a quick process. Addison's legal aid lawyer tried everything they could to slow it down. They filed motions, asked for extensions. They argued that Addison should be allowed to stay in the house because she was a new mother. She had the baby during this period and had limited income. They painted me as the wealthy, heartless brother trying to evict a struggling sister and her newborn. My lawyer had to respond to all of this, explaining that I was simply exercising my legal right as a co-owner and that the situation was precipitated by their initial unreasonable demands. There were a couple of short court hearings that my lawyer attended on my behalf. I didn't have to go, which I was grateful for. The judge ultimately agreed that the law was clear. The property had to be sold and the proceeds divided since we couldn't agree. The court then appointed a neutral real estate agent to handle the sale. This was to make sure it was all done fairly and at arm's length. Getting the house actually listed took another couple of months. My mother and sister were predictably not very cooperative with the agent. The agent told my lawyer they made it difficult to schedule viewings. Sometimes they wouldn't answer the door, or the house would be a mess when potential buyers came. My lawyer had to send another formal letter to Addison's lawyer warning them that if they kept obstructing the sale, we would ask the court to intervene further and they could be held responsible for any extra costs or delays. That seemed to work a bit. They became more compliant, but I'm sure they weren't happy. The house was officially on the market for about 3 months. It got a decent amount of interest. It finally sold for $380,000. This was a good price, right in the middle of the range we expected. After all the costs were paid, the real estate agent's commission, legal fees for the sale itself, and some other standard closing costs, the total amount left to be split between me and Addison was about $345,000. So my 50% share came to $172,500. Addison got the exact same amount. The money was wired into my bank account last week. Seeing that transfer come through was a strange feeling. Relief, mostly. My mother, Addison Walt, and the baby, it's a boy I found out indirectly, had to be out of the house before the sale closed. The real estate agent did a final walkthrough. She said they left it reasonably clean, no major damage, which was one of my worries. Apparently it was very cluttered, and they took right up until the last possible day to move all their things out. I can only imagine how stressful that must have been for them. But they had months of notice that this was coming. My life now. I'm still in my apartment. Of course it feels even more like my sanctuary now. That $172,500 from the sale is sitting in a high-interest savings account while I decide what to do with it. Maybe invest it or use it as a down payment on a small rental property in the future. For now, just knowing it's there and that the financial link to my family is completely cut is a huge relief. I sleep better. I'm less stressed at work. My mother's situation. I don't have any direct contact with anyone, but I've heard little bits of information through the grapevine. Mainly a distant cousin who is more neutral and occasionally posts vague things on social media that seem to allude to the situation. It seems my mother moved in with one of her sisters, my Aunt Carol. From what I gather, it's a very temporary thing and Aunt Carol's house is small, so it's already causing some friction there. Mom is reportedly very bitter. She's telling everyone who will listen that I'm a monster who made my own family homeless for money. Addison and Walt's situation with her $172,500. Addison and Walt apparently rented a small apartment. It's in a town about an hour's drive from the city where rents are cheaper. I don't know any specifics beyond that. That money is a lot for them. If they are smart, it could be a down payment on their own small house, or at least give them a good cushion. But knowing Walt's track record with work and their past requests for money from me, I have my doubts about how long it will last them. Addison has her baby now. I have no idea if Walt ever got that stable job he was supposedly looking for. I am an uncle, but I've never seen my nephew. That's a strange thought. Extended family. Most of the relatives who called me to tell me how selfish I was have gone completely silent. No apologies, nothing. A couple of my younger cousins who I was closer to when we were kids did reach out to me individually a few months ago. They said they'd heard more details. I think one of them might have seen my original anonymous post, or someone shared it. They were much more understanding, even a bit sympathetic. I was polite, but I kept the conversations brief and didn't encourage more contact. The trust is gone. No contact maintained. I have had zero direct contact with my mother or sister since before the court proceedings really got going. They haven't tried to call or message me in months. I think they finally understood it was pointless, or their lawyers told them to stop. It's just silence. And honestly, the silence is peaceful. The sale of Grandma's house is definitely the end of this whole ugly story. It was a difficult, draining, and really sad process from start to finish. It made me see my family, especially my mother and sister, in a completely different light and not a good one. It finalized the fact that we don't really have a relationship anymore.